Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I've compiled a list of all the phases that I think most artists go through in their lifetime. So the first one that I wanted to address is maybe pretty obvious, but it's the how to draw phase. Basically, when a lot of artists are just starting out and they're just compiling a bunch of how to draw books and trying to teach themselves with various tutorials that they can find in books. Now for me, this was the Chris Hart How to Draw Manga for Kids, I think it was called. I'll put up a image of what that cover looked like. But basically it was pretty terrible. I think Chris Hart has actually gotten a lot better at drawing, or maybe he's outsourcing it to someone else, but regardless, the point is that a lot of artists start off with just trying to learn straight from books. And honestly, I would kind of recommend against it. I mean, obviously there's absolutely no harm in it. I think almost everyone starts at this phase, but as soon as possible, I would recommend trying to find more building blocks for how to draw rather than drawing from these very basic tutorial type books, because a lot of the time they only teach you how to draw basically a copy of their own illustrations, whereas what you're really looking for is the tools to make your own style and the tools to build your own illustrations. Some books are a lot better than others though. A lot of comic books, for some reason, not comic books, but books about making comics are really good and teach you more about how to build a scene or something like that your own way. But yeah, basically be aware of anything that's like, draw these shapes, and then they don't really tell you what the shapes are going to be, because then you're kind of just doing, you know, step by step by step without really learning about why you do the steps. Like when you draw the circle, you're supposed to be thinking about the 3D rotation of the head usually. That's why you're using the circle to sort of map it out. If they just tell you to draw a circle and don't even tell you what it's going to be, there's really no point to that. Honestly, this is one of the most frustrating phases because I felt like I was just constantly not replicating the drawings well enough, but it's also what really got me seriously into art, and for that, I can't thank this phase enough. Next up is what I lovingly describe as the OC machine phase, and I think a lot of you can really identify with this one. I think a lot of you are currently in this one, and honestly, I think once you enter it, you never really leave it, so I guess I'm in it too. Basically, the OC machine is just that phase when you can't stop making original characters, which is what OC stands for, not operating, what's the OC stand for? That, you know, that TV show? Gosh, I'm botching this joke. Anyway, so a lot of artists get really into making their own original characters. They love them, they talk about them all the time, they know their favorite food, they know the exact date of their first kiss. Basically, they're about as obsessed with their OCs as a lot of people are with fictional characters that other people write, which is a really good phase when you want to tell stories in the future, because a lot of the time, if you're a visual person, the way that you'll start your story is by creating your own original character, and the idea for the story will sort of come from them and their life that you imagine for them. So creating OCs can be really beneficial in that way if you're the type of person who wants to make a comic or a animated pilot or anything like that. These are also kind of the most unapproachable type of artist a lot of the time, maybe barring one, which I'll talk about in a second, because they're so in their own head. Now, that's kind of unavoidable. I mean, they're basically just imagining the rich internal lives of their original characters a lot of the time, and who can blame them? It's very fun. The negatives of being in this phase is that a lot of the times, if you get way too stuck on making your own Cs for too long, then you don't practice backgrounds and you don't practice a lot of other stuff that you're supposed to be doing other than costume and character design. The good news is that maybe you could become a character designer if that really is your passion, but otherwise you might want to start forcing yourself to draw stuff other than your OCs, and one of the best ways to get some practice in on your backgrounds or things like that is to try to give your OC a home, like design their room. Then it can feel like you're still basically designing them, and it encourages you to practice the sort of spatial reasoning and perspective that it requires to draw a room. This next phase is probably the worst one to actually go through, but it is one where you're going to learn a lot during it, so it's sort of a mixed bag experience-wise. This is what I call the everything I make sucks phase. I've been through it many times. I will be going through it probably many times in the future. And you guys probably, if you haven't been through this phase yet, prepare yourself because it's coming for you soon. Basically, this is a phase where your experience level, your skill level, all of that does not align with what you want to draw in your head. Now, a lot of the time, total beginners can't get over this because they don't have expectations for themselves yet, because this is a brand new skill that they're just sitting down to learn. But once you kind of get into art and you get a real appreciation and an eye for certain things, it can become really overwhelming when you realize how much you need to learn and how much you need to be able to do if you want to actually get the images in your head down onto the paper. And that can generate this phase, basically where every time you draw, you just look down and you're like, that sucks, that is horrible, I can't believe I drew that, I don't know how to draw, I'm not a real artist, and you just have kind of this like negative spiral of like telling yourself that you're terrible. If you're going through this phase right now, I just want to say hang in there. It's not going to last forever. If you keep drawing, you're probably going to be hugely motivated to learn during this time, and that is great. One of the worst things that can happen to you as an artist is that you get just totally comfortable and you stop learning. And that is actually a much worse place to be, even though it feels a lot better than this. So if you are in this phase, at least know that you're probably improving very rapidly, and once the phase is over, you're going to have a whole new appreciation for drawing and your own art. One of the things you can do if you're just completely dying of frustration is just try to draw something super easy, just very relaxed. Like you could even just draw a stick figure or something. Just successfully drawing one thing can get you out of this mode and make you realize that you're not as bad as you think you are. And other than that, just keep up the good work and don't give up. The next phase I want to talk about is the materialistic artist phase. You can identify this phase in yourself when you find yourself looking up lots of reviews for tablets or paints or things like that, going into art stores all the time, constantly just poring over different marker sets and things like that, wishing that you had the money to buy a bunch of art supplies that you might not even use. This is basically the clear signs to see when you are in this phase. The truth is that you can pretty much draw with almost any supplies, so it's not like you can't make art with limited supplies or anything like that, but sometimes you get in this phase where you just become obsessed with getting new art supplies and finding new ways to sort them and just looking at different basically sets and things that you've never tried before, or trying to expand your collection of things that you've already started to collect, like markers. A lot of people have an ongoing Copic collection that they're constantly looking for good deals on how to expand their colors in that. Basically, this is kind of the phase where buying art supplies for yourself is more fun than actually drawing with them, and it's a little problematic, as you can probably imagine, but usually these things fade pretty quickly, either one, when you run out of pocket change to buy the art supplies that you need, or when you just settle back into probably the things that you were drawing with before. But this phase can be really helpful because you might end up finding something that you really love to work with. I discovered recently that I quite like using gouache because there was some gouache that I just happened to have, and if I didn't impulse buy that some many years ago, I never would have found that out about myself. So I guess what I would say is don't necessarily resist this phase, but try not to spend too much money on art supplies because a lot of them you're probably not going to actually like using. I often find myself splurging on stuff that I end up never using again. This was especially a problem in art school when I didn't have a choice, but let's just say there's a lot of dead acrylics in my closet that are never ever going to see the light of day again because my God, do I hate golden acrylics. They are the worst, and I regret that I had to buy $300 worth of them. This last phase is one that often starts in art school, but it can pop up in various different times in your life, depending on what you're kind of doing with your art. I call this the serious artiste phase. Basically, it's when you start wanting to be taken seriously. Maybe you started drawing from a Christopher Hart How to Draw Manga book, and all of a sudden you're realizing that manga and anime art isn't getting you the kind of respect that you want, especially if you just joined art school and a lot of your teachers friggin' hate that another culture's cartoons are getting popular, and basically they're just really hoping that everyone's suddenly going to get really into impressionism. So a lot of people will suddenly pretend that they got into drawing because they're really into life drawing and they really love traditional value studies, and that's what they live for. And this is basically what brings this phase about. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to get your fundamentals and do these kinds of exercises, but I think you would pretty much be a liar to say that that's your favorite thing to draw. Some people really, really love it, and I actually did quite like life drawing and things like that, but let's be real here, guys. A lot of people would much rather draw their own creative vision rather than a pile of fruit in black and white with some charcoal. Like, that's just, them's the facts. So pretending that this is your favorite thing and that you never ever drew a cartoon in your life, it's not going to get you where you need to go. I think the best way to sort of deal with this is, rather than rejecting your entire past and everything that you used to love, is to try to find ways to incorporate the classical training that you're receiving along with the fundamentals that you learned when you were a kid and the things that genuinely excited you about drawing when you first got started. Because I think that trying to reject everything that you used to love to draw is going to make you very bitter in the future, and you don't want that, because you also don't want to reject everything that you learned in art school either. You have to find a way to combine the things that you're genuinely passionate about with the classical training that you're receiving. Okay, so I wasn't actually sure how accurate this would be. These are mainly based on phases that I've actually been through, so please let me know if any of these resonate with you. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you to all of my patrons, including Bella Story, Kalpampong, Clockwork Construct, Dionysus Hagarilis, Dr. Casket, Elizabeth Album, Hope Chilsum, Imagine Creations, JJJ, Joseph Kopel, Carla Tapia, Cat Did That, Cured, blah blah blah, Making Claire, Midnight Doodles, Mechadactyl, Nora Cornelison, Okamore, Ollie, Rose Espinoza, Rosie Warlock, Sergeant Pendulum, The Artsy Moose, Your Boy ST, and Zoe Stardust.